Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for having me here. This is a place that I love. It's an amazing temple, and it's an amazing community, and I always just feel so lucky that I get to come all the way here and spend a little time with you. Yesterday we talked for a whole day about Keizan's Zazen Yōjinki, which is a wonderful text. And while that was happening, in the outside world, it was Groundhog Day. Which is this kind of amazing ritual we have, right? As a kid, I remember hearing about it, and I think even to a child it's so strange, but it's exciting, right, when you find out that it's Groundhog Day. And I remember waiting to hear the news, because nobody really wants 6 more weeks of winter. And so there's this little bit of hope, this little bit of magical thinking that maybe, and of course it's not clear, is it that the groundhog doesn't see his shadow, and so that's the reason that we don't have 6 more weeks of winter? Or does he not see his shadow because that's just how it works, and it's a reflection of something greater? But in any case, I remember hearing, and of course I looked it up, this started in the 1880s. Since that beginning in like 1887, he's only not seen his shadow 15 times, right? We kind of know he's going to see his shadow. And then of the 15 times, he was only right 7 times. So he has a less than 50% success rate with the early spring. So even if we get what we want, which happened yesterday, he didn't see his shadow, we kind of know there's 6 more weeks of winter. Right? It's sad, but it's true. And in this case, maybe it takes us 150 years to kind of catch on, but we've done the math and we can see how this process works. So I was thinking about this in particular because of what we were talking about yesterday. Keizan is very invested in the way that he talks about Zazen in talking about expectations. What is it that we want from this? What is it that we're going into looking for? And what do we get? I spoke about this a little bit yesterday. I had very specific things that I wanted from this practice when I took up this practice. And I think everybody does, at least on day 1, and probably on day 10, and probably somewhere into year 3 or further. There's something that gets you here. There's something that gets you through the door. And maybe in the beginning you can articulate it because somebody actually said to you, oh, if you sit, you'll achieve this, right? And for some people that's really big, and it's enlightenment. And for other people, maybe it's just they want to be more calm, or they want to be a particular kind of person. You know, Zen brings in a lot of people, I think, who just want to be more disciplined. And this seems like an avenue toward that. And so people, we all come in and we're looking for something. And then we're doing the practice, and as we're doing the practice, of course, we're watching for that thing. We're waiting for it to appear. We're waiting for the evidence or for the proof or for the gold star. We want to know that it works. And a lot of what we discussed yesterday was that in doing that, of course, we're measuring the practice, which is what we're told not to do over and over and over again. But we measure it by creating a kind of pass-fail system. Have I become the person that I thought I would become? No? Well then, either I'm failing or the practice is failing. It's very narrow. It's very, very small. I have an idea sometimes that what we do when we sit in particular, and I feel this, at the beginning of a sesshin, there's all this energy at the beginning of sesshin, right? Because you're not just settling in to sit for 50 minutes, you're settling in to sit for an eternity, right? So there's all this kind of, you're psyching yourself up, you're planning it out. So I'm gonna get through this, I'm gonna do this. And because it has a beginning and an end, it feels like an opportunity not to waste, right? I should get something out of this. I should come out the other side somehow transformed, right? This is my chance. Because I've been coming every morning and the transformation isn't happening there, I'm still me. So if I do this, if I dive into this, then I'll step up one step maybe, right? This is what's going to get me there. And so you get really, I think at the beginning of sesshin, everyone's back is a little bit straighter than it would be usually, right? And everything's a little bit more perfect, and there's this kind of glint in your eyes, right? There's this resolve. I'm here. I know why I'm here. And what we do, the image that I have, is that we all have this egg that we're holding, right? We're holding up this egg, and we're just saying, I'm not going to drop this egg. I'm going to sit perfectly still, and I'm going to breathe just the way I need to breathe, and I'm going to hold my mind just the way I need to hold my mind, and this egg is going to stay safe, right? We do that for a day, and maybe we do it for 2 days, and this image works for me because you can go home and you can try it. Just sit at a table and hold an egg for a while, right? It starts out feeling fine, but it gets pretty bad. We can't do this. It's the lightest thing, but we can't do it for very long. And then what happens inevitably, I think inevitably, is one of two things. Either we just drop it because we can't hold it anymore, or we give up and we just throw down the egg. And in either case, and I think everyone knows this experience, the sesshin begins then. It's in that moment of giving up. It's in that moment of failing in relationship to your own metric, in relationship to your own expectations, but where you don't leave. You don't stand up and quit. Now you're stuck with a broken egg. You can't clean it up. Right? You can't put it back together. And now you're left sitting in your failure. You're left sitting in your dashed hopes. And you're no longer staring at this egg. Right? Your goal is gone. And everything opens up. Keizan talked about this. It's the most beautiful thing at the very end. He says, after he lays out all these very interesting instructions for Zazen, some of which are very technical about the actual sitting, some of which have to do with your whole lifestyle, like don't eat spoiled foods, some of which are very kind of lofty and philosophical, but at the very end, he says, be like cold ashes, be like a withered tree. We're told to sit as Buddha in this tradition, not like a Buddha, but as Buddha. And I think that's a hard thing to, it's a hard mental leap for us. Many traditions, when they say how to sit, they hold up the image of the Buddha sitting beneath the Bodhi tree, and what they mean, they don't mean sit as Buddha, they mean sit as Siddhartha. Because he sat down with this resolve, right? He sat down with an egg. He sat down with such a commitment to achieving a thing. That wasn't the Buddha yet. The Buddha is the person who stood up the next morning and started walking. Our tradition says sit as that person. Sit as the person who's already done it. Sit as the person who's on the other side. the one who's ready to act, the one who now sees clearly her place in the world. So to be like cold ashes. Cold ashes, they're the after. The event that happened, the fire, the heat, the excitement, the light, that's done. And a withered tree, it's not growing. It's not blooming. And it's not reaching for the sun. It has no imperative anymore. It's accomplished everything that it's going to accomplish. It's finished. And now it just is. It's just there. It's complete. Its story is over. He says, be like that. Let go completely of the project. Let go completely of the thing that you think you need to do. Let go completely of the sense that there is a gap between where you are and where you're going. This is obviously good advice for Zazen, but it's also, like all good Zazen instruction, it's just good advice for our life. What is your egg? What's the thing that you think you need to hold in order to be good or to be right? What's the thing that you need to protect so that it doesn't break? On the most basic level, of course, we would say it's I. Right? It's this idea about that I am me and that I'm separate. But more specifically, we all have our stuff, right? We have that thing. For some people, it might be a regret. But it's a regret that we feel like if we stop looking at it, we don't know who we are. Or there's a hope in that regret that if we look at it hard enough, we'll resolve it. Somehow we'll untangle that knot. Or it's an idea of what we should do, or it's an idea of what we might become. It's a relationship that we treat as fragile. So we keep it, but we don't poke it. Right. Or it's a worldview. It's a belief that everything is basically good. Or it's a belief in some sort of afterlife. It's a belief that somehow, in some way, through some mechanism, I will be rewarded. The universe will notice me or thank me for this. That becomes an egg that, if it's broken, we don't know what we have anymore. We don't know what to do. Would I still sit? Would I still come here? Would I still act the way I act? Would I be who I think I am? So what we do if we can recognize this in ourselves, or we can recognize this instinct or this tendency, when we can figure out what the egg is, if we just break it, don't wait for it to fall. You can waste years of your life. Right? Smash the egg. That's what Keizan says. Move on. And start from that hopeless place. The role of the Bodhisattva is to give. And to give, to truly give, is to give without thought of reward. And you cannot give without thought of reward if you are maintaining some hope, some secret hope of what all this might mean, what might come back. I hear all the time in various traditions people saying some variation of, and this from a Buddhist perspective, when you're kind to others, you're really mostly being kind to yourself, right? The benefit you offer others is nothing compared to the benefit that comes back to you, right? And it's a very beautiful image, it's a very inspiring image, and it's a great encouragement to do good, but you need to drop that. You need to drop that thinking that somehow this circles back to me. That's just another egg. Crack it. You throw it away. Sit in this way with nothing. With no idea that there's something that you're preserving or that you're earning or that you're saving. To do something so completely with no idea of getting anything back is the basic foundation of giving. If you can do that, you can offer anything. Truly offer anything. So, Keizan tells us, be like cold ashes. Be like a withered tree. I would add, be like a broken egg. Be like spilled milk. Sit knowing without any question that you're always going to see your shadow. There will always be 6 more weeks of winter. Forever. And start from there. And that's where I'll stop.
Questions
or anything.
Take a few?
Yes, anything. It's just fun to talk. Yes.
When you first mentioned the cold ashes and the withered tree, my thought was, those things aren't useful anymore.
Right.
They're not good for anything. And later you talked about they're finished, their story is done. So those are a bit different, I think, ways of looking at it.
Right.
So could you say anything more about not being useful? You know, the cold ashes. I mean, actually, I think you're saying they are very useful if we think that way. If we become that.
Yeah. I think that, I'm glad you brought that up because it's true. There's something, there's also something discarded about these things. Right? what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
But, and I think that if we're in a third-party position and we're looking at cold ashes, we're thinking, oh, what's that? But he's saying, you know, to embody it,
Mm-hmm.
it's first person, be that,
Mm-hmm.
right?
That's very different.
Right, it is, because you're letting go of the idea that you're useful, right? You're letting go of the idea that you have a purpose,
Mm-hmm.
right? That there's a way things should be, or that you have a vitality, or that you have a kind of climax that you haven't reached yet,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? A tree has this it's growing and growing and growing until it's not, and then it just freezes. Right? We don't get to know when that happens. So I think yes, I think if you're watching this, if you're taking this view from the outside, you would think, well, what's the point? But I think it's experiential to let go of the idea of your value in a way, so that you can be open to something unexpected.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yes.
And isn't it, as you said, it's your perception? Meaning, my garden likes the action. Mushrooms grow on the dead trees. So they do have a purpose, it's just I haven't perceived it.
Right, right. And they're not being active in it, right?
Yeah.
They're kind of receptive. And in the same text, Keizan talks about the wind bell, right? That the wind bell just, the bell doesn't do anything, right? It hangs there. And then the wind comes and hits it, and then it rings. It's available, but it's not grasping. It's not searching for its job. It's fulfilling its job by just being where it is. Yes.
This also reminded me of some lines from T.S. Eliot's long poem, Four Quartets. I'll see if I can remember them.
I'm already
here,
impressed.
people who know that. He says, "Wake without hope, because hope would be hope for the wrong thing." Can't remember the rest of it.
That's
But
enough.
Yeah.
That's great.
Mhm.
Right. I think that one of the things that this tradition offers is a vision of hopelessness that isn't despairing, right? Because that's what we associate hopelessness with, a kind of loss. But to wake without hope is to wake in the most open possible way, right? It's beautiful. It doesn't have to be sad. Yes?
Excuse me. When you said the cold ashes and the withered tree, another image came to me that actually someone said this to me one time, that of the cracked pot. And someone once told me that a lot of people who work in hospice, for example, they're crackpots because they've had some tragedy in their lives and they come as cracked pots. And that's what leads them to do the work. And I think many, many people come to the Dharma for the same reason, because they've had some experience or many experiences in their lifetime, and they want to heal and close up the crack, be restored.
Right.
And this is a totally different idea, which is come as a crackpot and just stay cracked or become more cracked.
That's right.
And
that could be the slogan. Come as a crackpot, stay as a crackpot.
What's a crackpot?
That's right.
So that's really, really helpful to me to think that way. And just be open to whatever happens and don't have that expectation that this is going to solve everything. Right. Which is very hard, I think, in the beginning. We don't get to ask that of people when they show up.
but you can cultivate an atmosphere where that can be kind of discovered. It's something I've been thinking about a lot recently, and it feels resonant with this. We talked about this yesterday. We talked about the baseline, that we have an idea of what our human baseline is, of what we should feel like all the time, right? Part of that is physical, and the way we talked about it yesterday is, we have this cultural imperative to never feel pain, right? So no matter what it is in your life, we treat pain because pain is bad, right? You shouldn't be uncomfortable physically. But the other one I think that's more interesting to me in relationship to this practice is emotionally, right? Nobody wants to feel sad, right? But one of the things that we do is when we feel sad, then we also believe deeply, I shouldn't feel sad. Either, not because you necessarily think that the reason is wrong, but because as a human being, I should not have to feel this way, right? The correct way to feel is to feel happy and at ease. And I don't feel that way, therefore I must correct this. And so you have the original feeling, which is sadness, and then you have the dissociative feeling of being kind of frustrated with yourself about being sad and feeling that it needs to be corrected, right? And so we dive into this impossible work of trying to restore ourselves to the place that we think we're supposed to be, where I think there is a healthy version of sadness, where you're sad and you think, yeah, I'm sad today. It's okay, I have that, there's a crack. That's fine, right? It doesn't mean it feels good, but it's not wrong. That, I think, too, allows us movement in a way that we sometimes deny ourselves. Yes?
I remember many years ago hearing you talk about a documentary that followed Temple Abbot around, and he was an older man, and they asked him what he did, and he said, oh, I just kind of wander around, straighten pictures or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember you mentioning you were upset because that seemed, like to paint him in a poor light, when actually he meant something else, something more profound. And I've thought about that a lot over the years, and I hear you talk about the notion that a lot of people have of you're kind of doing this to you because that's you, so I'll give to me, and that's good to give to me. And in my head, it kind of transformed a little bit to more like maintenance, But even that, it sounds like, is something that maybe, because that almost sounds like a purpose. It's a little more passive, I suppose. It's a little less, I'm giving to myself, and boy, won't that feel good. I don't do it with any expectation. I just sort of do it, but even that still sounds like a purpose.
Well, it can be a project, right? And to clarify this, so there was an interview years ago with Miyazaki Zenji, who was the abbot of Eiheiji, and lived until he was 108 or something. Yeah, amazing. Yeah. And this was probably done when he was around 100, so still a very young man. And what I remember from that interview was they asked him, the interviewer said, well, because at that point he's 100 years old, so at that point he's been practicing Zen for something like 85 years. And they were, what does it feel like? Well, what's the outcome of that? And he said, I straighten a lot of pictures. Which was such a disappointing answer, I think, for the interviewer as well. But did also feel very true to my experience of the practice. It's, you see something that you can address, and you just address it. That's it. It's little things, right? It's not framed in terms of, I think we begin in such a lofty way, and there's such a power to sitting down and thinking, well, I've got 50 minutes, I'm going to save all beings, right? But I think coming out of that, a few years later, and thinking, well, it's more like tidying up. It's just doing the thing that nobody else did, because it's there, and it just takes a second. It's very reduced expression. of what's going on. Yeah, I still think about that a lot. It was a great quote. Yes?
So Sawaki Hiroshi's phrase that's sort of similar to this idea, he says Zazen is good for nothing. So I wonder what you think about that. Because sometimes people I think they hear that and they kind of get the wrong idea. Like, oh, well, then I just shouldn't do it. Or something like that. So.
Yeah, it has no... This is... When I hear Zazen is good for nothing, and I love it. I've heard a story too, I don't know if it's true, that Katagiri Roshi offered some lecture once outside of Minnesota Zen Center, and he titled it Zazen is good for nothing, or essentially that, and that nobody came. But, when I hear that, what I imagine is we want Zazen to be a battery, right, that fits in something. We want it especially to be like a AA, because AA's seem to go in almost everything, right? And so that we want it to be the thing that powers everything else. It's going to make it brighter, it's going to make it stronger, it's going to make it, right, it adds juice to something. And it's not a tool in that way, right? It's not something that we can plug into something else as a source of energy, or that when we can't pour it on top like a special sauce. It's complete. It's its own thing. And so Zazen is good for nothing for me means it's not a tool. But yeah, it's bad marketing too. If that's the goal. Okay. Maybe one more? If there is one more.
Well, yesterday we were talking about this idea of being a fool, being an idiot.
Yeah.
So as someone for whom sometimes the egg is frequently public competence, would you say a few things for this group about what it is to be a fool?
Yeah. So there's, we have this phrase, to be like a fool, like an idiot. It shows up twice in Zazen Yōjinki. There's only one other phrase that shows up twice, which is do nothing at all, which is very relevant to this whole conversation. And then we also hear it in Hokkyo Zanmai, or Precious Mirror Samadhi, and then we also hear it in Harmony of Difference and Equality of Sandokai, right? To be like a fool, like an idiot. I think that's right. Maybe we only hear it in one. Anyway, my understanding of that is that the fool the fool isn't stupid, right? But the fool is not doing something while simultaneously thinking about the thing and watching himself or herself doing the thing. The fool is just doing the thing, right? Which seems kind of stupid, right? Why would you take something up without also having that self-reflective, analytical experience of it? Why would you do something without also asking, what does this mean? Right? We're so interested in meaning. What does it mean, maybe cosmically, or what does this mean about me? What does this mean about my practice? And the example I like to give is I met a karate teacher once, and he was talking about how in order to be really good, in order to kind of be the model, that you have to be, his phrase was, you have to be a little bit stupid. And the example that he gave was, he said, you have to be someone who digs post holes. And if you've ever dug post holes, right, there's this thing that goes into the ground, and it's very monotonous. You dig one, and then you dig another, and you dig another, and it's hard. And I guess it's a little bit satisfying because you always get a new one. But that new one is exactly the same as the one before it. And it's exactly the same as the one that's after it. And if it's your job, that's all you're doing. And he said, you can't be in the opposite of the fool and do that job. Because every time you do it, you're thinking, why am I doing this? Or you're thinking, that's 300. Or you're thinking, I have 200 to go. Whatever that is. there's something in your mind is in the way of your activity, and the fool lacks that obstruction. Again, not because the fool is unintelligent, but because the fool has dropped those why questions. That's not the driving force anymore, right? Which takes me back to this moment in Sesshin, right? There's a moment in Sesshin, I think, when you kind of give up, and yet you don't leave. Nothing could be more critical than that moment, right? That's the moment of your life. The fool has given up and has not stopped in their work. That is rare and wonderful.
And on that rare and wonderful note, we probably ought to wrap it up.
Thank you so much.
So we'll do a little chant first.